Hello, welcome to the Tell Not Show. I'm Kirsha Fox, author of the Deception and Justice series with the newly released Keeper of the Demon's Skull. My co-host, Julia J.K. Allen, is an editor, author, and author coach. She loves to sprinkle magic and everything, but she can't be with us tonight. We're so excited to welcome our guest, Brandi Schonberg, who also writes under the name Tabitha Leigh. She became hooked on reading as a youth and now invites others to find solace, adventure, love, and passion in fantasy realms, outer space, and reinvented parallel realities. Welcome, Brandi. All right. So, Brandi, can you tell me a little bit about your writing journey? What got you started and why?
I'm going to do the standard. I've always written, but I kind of have. In middle school, had an amazing she was my English teacher, but she was a published author. She'd won an award for a book called Ryan's Hand, and she was writing historical fiction. And she was my god. I was constantly trying to impress her. And she returned a short story to me and wrote, "You're a natural born writer." And I've kept that. It's in a folder, and I have never put it anywhere, but it's always been with me.
Aww.
And I had her again in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the coolest thing ever to be able to email her a couple of years ago and say, "Guess what? I did it." But I have always written. I did write a lot of poetry in high school. I think a lot of high school girls go through that.
It's a rite of passage, isn't it?
Yes. I sat in algebra and did a lot more poetry writing than algebra.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably why I almost didn't pass algebra. And, I played at it.
Mm-hmm.
I never had the stick-to-itiveness to finish anything. And it was just, I used it as an escape. I used it as just a way to get out of my own head and get into spaces that were a lot more fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always just something I did in as a pastime until the first book that I just published. That took me the better part of probably 11 years to write. I wrote 14 chapters. It started to sound like fantasy Scooby-Doo, and I chunked all but the first two and started it over. And the first draft was and then I sat down and rewrote and finished it in about 3 months in 2019. So it has gone through an enormous amount of trials and tribulations. It was picked up by an episodic company out of England right before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And then they lost all of their funding. And they were trying to do what they were calling Netflix for books.
Mm-hmm.
So they were really trying to do what Amazon just did and put away, what Wattpad had been doing, but they were trying to make a very viable platform for it, and they lost all their funding. And so a bunch of the authors in that group got together, and we published ourselves.
Yeah.
And I published it right after my husband of 20 years passed away. And I promise you, that's the thing you never want to do. Don't ever publish a book 2 or 3 months after that happens, because you aren't ready. There's typos. You didn't include anything you wanted to include. It was a fog. And so I re-released it. I went back and did all the things I needed to do and re-released it in this year. So
that is quite a journey.
Yeah.
Yes. It's so funny how often storytellers know from a very early age that there's something in us that needs to tell stories and to consume stories. And oh my goodness, like to have a teacher like that who nurtures that and gives you kind notes and just inspires you.
Absolutely.
And then, not barely getting through math. That's really relatable.
And the funny thing is I'm a science teacher now. I teach middle school, and everybody's like, "Oh, you're great at math." No, but I can write papers.
Yes.
So
from what I know of science, I think writing papers is oftentimes more important than the actual science.
It is. That's what I tell
you know how to measure things. You're good.
I said scientists don't make TikToks of their findings. They have to write papers, and they have to write them well. So
I mean, you could make TikToks.
You could after the fact.
That's not. Yeah, that's not
Yeah.
your primary engagement there.
Right.
Um, and I'm so sorry about your husband. That's an unimaginable for me at this point. But
Thank you.
yeah, what genres do you write and why?
I write fantasy. I also I love writing sci-fi. I think it's probably in terms of writing my first language, but
Mm-hmm.
I have one that I'm working on right now. I haven't gotten to it. I want to finish this fantasy series, and I write YA fantasy. I write everything. It's going to start sounding like this litany of genres. I'm actually going to put out a paranormal romance.
Mm-hmm.
Never thought I'd say that. Next year.
That's
I've already got the first draft. I'm actually revising right now, and a YA fairy tale mashup retelling that I'm also working on. I have a pen name that I use for my YA middle grade, and I have one novella that is out called Hide, and it's set here in Texas. It's set in my hometown, and it's kind of like what I kind of wished would have happened in my childhood. You know, it's like survival apocalyptic kind of thing, but
mm-hmm.
um, that's out right now. So now I'm obligated to write a sequel to finish it. I published it as a practice before I put the second version of The Gate out. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna throw it up there. It's been on Vella. It's already been out there. Not a big deal. And I practiced to throw it out, and then started reading it and going, oh my god, I put that out. It's awful. It was terrible. Like it
And
was just technically terrible. So
yeah,
I redid it, re-put it back out, and now I have it kind of where I want it. So I'm going to finish that one out and play with that a little more.
well, I can totally relate. With my first book, like you can do as much research as you can, but there's a lot of like conflicting opinions, and of course you had your publisher drop out, so like you had to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know everything and do everything, and yeah, there's nothing that helps you find typos just like turning to a random page in your own book, and it's right there. Um, I sent my book through several editors and several beta readers, and even then, that first edition had some mistakes,
Yeah.
formatting and just typos, and the things that you learned afterward. You want to go back and like fix it. So I like to tell people that even if you made mistakes for the first time around, that you're not doomed.
No.
You can re-release it.
You feel like you are the first time you find that one on the first book you publish. Like my
Mhm.
stomach dropped, and I wanted to just throw up. It was awful. And I had to talk myself off the ledge and be like, it's okay. Everybody gets typos. It's not a big deal. And then I found like a fourth one. I'm like, no. So that's when I kind of decided, you know what? We're going to have a do-over. We're going to do it the way we want it. New cover. I'm actually going to include the map. I'm actually
Yes.
going to include the pronunciation guide. I'm going to do all the
Mhm.
things I didn't do. And it's a much better book for that
Mhm.
process. So you write it as a learning process. And you have to be kind to yourself.
You really do. You really do. It's so easy to throw up your hands and give up,
Yes,
but it's some like it's a labor of love. We love this and we want to keep going. Yeah.
absolutely.
So, how does your writing process look? Of course, you had that initial gap where you were working on the one book, but it sounds like you're working on a lot of different things now.
I
Uh,
am.
so, how do you go from idea to finished draft?
I am
Good
I
question.
am the quintessential, and I love how Brandon Sanderson changed it from pantser to discovery writer. That
Mhm.
sounds so much more professional. It's 100% what I am. As much as I would love to sit and map something out, a good 90% of what I write happens as I'm writing.
Mhm.
Characters showing up you didn't expect to be there. You didn't even know who they were. And this character walks in the room. You're like, well, hello, there you are. And whole plot things like this second book that I'm finishing up that's supposed to be out at the end of the month, end of December, not this month. Oh my God. Um,
We're almost there.
the whole end of the book is completely different from what I thought it was going to be. And
Mhm.
that hinged on two very specific scenes that as I was writing them, a character showed up and said, hey, and things changed. And I like to follow that.
Mhm.
So it's when I can sit down and I can focus and I can start writing, and it takes me where it's going to take me. And now I'm at the point where I literally have 4 chapters left. I have got the chapter title, the synopsis of what's going to happen in that chapter, and I've discovered that's a little bit of a plotting thing I can do, is I can figure out the next couple of chapters and write, okay, so this happens, this happens, this happens.
You
And
see your
that,
trajectory. Yeah.
yeah, that's the best I think I can do right now in terms of outlining. But
Yes.
very much a pantser discovery writer.
Yeah, I agree that discovery writer is a lot kinder of a term. The first time you hear pantsing, it's like, what am I pantsing people?
Right.
Like, um, and believe it or not, but the majority of authors we interview say, yeah, they are discovery writers.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's a little bit of a shame that a lot of us are taught in school that you must plot. You
Right.
must plot, and that's your number one step. And so many people can't do that. And so
Right.
they think, oh, I can't write.
Exactly.
Very good writer. I must not be cut out for this.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, sometimes you just sit down and go, and that's how you work.
100%.
Now, I'm a little bit of a hybrid where I have like a very flexible outline, but if I don't know where I'm going,
Hmm.
I can't write. It just the words won't come.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how there's as many ways to write as there are writers.
Absolutely. No, and everybody has a slightly different take on how they approach it.
Hmm.
Like everybody.
Yes, completely.
Hmm.
So for you, what is the most important?
Getting the words down. I mean, I say I'm a full-time teacher, and my kids are now finally all grown and not
Mhm,
at home, so that's been amazing to be able to. They still call like every 30 minutes, so I still have them up, but
mhm,
um, finding the time, getting the words down, and finding the time, and I'm really really trying to leave education and do this as much as I can on a full-time basis.
mhm,
And I'm beginning to feel like I know that if I had the time, I could I could get the words,
mhm.
and I just need that time. So like yesterday, I had a 4,000 word day. That's a big day for me, and
It is.
as yeah, because I'm desperate to get this done before Thanksgiving. My kids arrive tomorrow night, and I'm like, I have 4 chapters. I could do this.
Yes. Nothing like a looming deadline.
But yeah, no, honestly, I think the most important thing is to be able to find the time that you can get into your own head.
Mhm.
And especially for me, since I have to be in my own head for the story to progress.
Yes, yes.
So,
It's not just the time that you're in a chair typing away. You have to think about it. You have to mull it over. You have to plot out in your head. You have to like find those characters and get to
mhm,
know them and ask them what they want and what do they believe
right.
in. And there, I mean, there's so much more to writing than just typing.
Oh no, absolutely. I'm hyper visual, and
Mhm,
a former musician. You'd think that I would be auditory. I'm not at all. Like I am so visual. Like I will stop writing and I will go put on my guilty pleasure is Snow White and the Huntsman, and I
mhm.
would sit. I'll watch it like I'll watch it over and over and over, and there's something about it that triggers things in my head, and then I feel like okay, now I can write.
Yes. I think I know what you're talking about. I have ADHD, and sometimes I need something to take care of that busy part of my mind so that the
Yeah.
lower layers can think.
No, absolutely, and I've discovered too, like, I listen to music, but I don't listen to music that you would hear on the radio. I like
Mhm,
epic movie trailers, but now I'm listening to, like, the movie trailer musicians that write with vocalists, and there are some lyrics, and for some reason, that playing in my head occupies that
mhm,
so that I
mhm.
can do the rest.
Yeah, that's good that you have figured out how you work
Mhm.
so that you can just turn it on and sink into your zone.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. For you, do you begin with characters or plot?
Honestly, I think I begin with setting. I
Okay.
think I start with the world. I love world building.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I will start with a place and a character that fits that place,
Mm-hmm.
and something. obviously something terrible has happened to that character, or there's something wonderful going on. I don't know, but it'll start first with the place and then the character. And
Yes.
then the plot tells itself as I go.
Well, you're a D&D player, as you mentioned earlier before we began recording. And I actually hear that quite a lot from D&D players, particularly DMs, because so often you're just starting with the setting and what
Mhm.
is happening and the events without necessarily having to create the characters, because the characters, you never know what they're going to do.
Right.
So, but it's funny that I hear that a lot from D&D players, that we start with the setting.
Yeah.
And then, but we get tripped up if we don't actually do the rest of it. Some
Sure.
people spend so much time
Mhm.
creating the world, and once they're finished, they're like, well, I'm done with that. Time to move on to something
I
else.
I think because I am ADHD enough, I get bored with the world building part, and then I have to do something in it, and then I'll start to, then I'll go back and forth and back and forth. I'm kind of a big picture person, so the details start to make me zone.
Mm-hmm.
So then I have to get back. I have to switch and change. Like I'll write a paragraph, and then I'll get up and do laundry, and then I'll come back and sit down and write another paragraph, and then get up
Mm-hmm.
and make something to eat. And then I'm like, I can't even watch a movie without getting up and doing something in the middle of it. It's ridiculous.
We're busy. There's a lot to take care of. Just, just being alive.
Yeah.
Someone has to do the laundry. Someone
Absolutely.
has to do the dishes.
Yeah. It's
So,
just, it's good for me. I think that it lets me get something out, go do something, come back. It's like,
mhm,
it's, I can't hyper focus for a long period of time.
mhm.
So,
So, do you have a favorite author, and what is something that they do best?
I have a couple.
Mhm,
Robin Hobb, the Assassin's Apprentice series. It's the first series that made me openly weep. And Robin Hobb's world building is exquisite. Um, she has this entire world where she's got several different stories, several different series set in this world, and they don't all overlap, but they're all in the same place.
mhm,
And it's really cool to hear about this river over here that this whole story centers around. Well, you're not even going there, but it's so immersive.
mhm, mhm,
So that would definitely be my world building person. I'm also a huge Pierce Brown fan from the Red Rising series,
mhm,
and that's space opera, space fantasy, kind of
mhm,
sci-fi. It's like sci-fi fantasy squashed together.
mhm,
Um, and Adam that's probably a world building thing too, but his characterizations are amazing. You
mhm.
just really, really get to know the characters on a much deeper level, like a visceral kind of level. Those are probably my top two.
Yes. I love the authors who have a universe and they write different books from different points of history, or like it's like sideways or
Hmm.
parallel or different, focusing on different characters.
Oh yeah,
Sometimes your favorite characters get their own spin-off, or
right.
they're just barely mentioned, but you're like, "Oh, I know them."
Yeah.
You meet the characters and you already have this glowing, warm response of, "Those are my friends. I'm so glad that the main character finally got to meet my friends."
Yes, absolutely.
It's hard for me when a series ends and you say goodbye to those characters that you love, but when there's a whole set, a different series, you're like, "Oh,
Hmm. Oh yeah, you're like, we're back.
you get to go back to that world."
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
So yeah, absolutely. My favorite authors do that too.
Hmm.
Just bring you back. All right. What have you learned from the writing process?
I've learned that I never stop learning. I tell my students this, I tell my children this. Every time I write, every time, I feel like I'm learning something new. I'm writing right now the last little bit before I send this final chunk to my editor, who is like going, where is it? Seriously.
Yeah, take time.
Um, but as I'm writing it, I am taking all of what she's done in the first half and I'm applying it. Like as I'm writing, I'm going, oh, she would want more from this. She would want to know what she's thinking here. I just feel like I'm constantly actively learning every time I'm at the computer
Mhm,
and
mhm,
thinking about this sentence that I just wrote. And I tend to draft slowly, but my first drafts are more like second or third drafts. I draft really clean drafts, and that is a byproduct of my middle and high school teacher. She was not a word vomit person. She was
Mhm,
a edit as you go person, and kind of ruined me for that. Just throw the words on the paper. I
mhm.
can't do it. I can't do
I
it.
also edit as I go. I can't help it. It's
I
just part
can't.
of how I write. I can't word vomit because I'm still stuck on that sentence that was wonky up a
Hmm.
couple paragraphs ago that's going to bother me until
Hmm.
I fix it.
So you end up in the end, when you're done, you end up with a much cleaner first
Yeah.
draft, and
Mhm.
it ultimately it saves time. I just go about it a different way.
Exactly.
But no, as far as what I've learned though, is that I'm always learning. That I'm not turning out the same. I'm not approaching it the same way. I'm not writing it the same way. Every time I sit down, I'm trying to be better, and I'm
Mhm.
trying to apply what I've had to change before. And I've watched things come back with less and less comment on the same thing. Like I don't get, like, yes, there is one, I use a word, I use just and I use eyes way too much. And I have not been able to break myself of the eyes one. Just I have broken myself of. But
Just is one of my overused words too.
okay.
At the very end, I do the search function and just go, oh my goodness, there are 356 justs in
Mm-hmm.
200 pages.
Yep.
Like,
Well, and I didn't even catch it till after
mhm.
the first book is out, published, and my narrator is reading it live on TikTok, and I'm like, "That's the fifth just in that whole paragraph. Oh my god,
Mhm.
there's
I
nothing I
actually
can do
have
about it
a
now."
list I keep of all of my usual overused words just so I can check them all. And
Yeah.
then I find a way to make new ones.
Yeah. And I didn't even know "just" was my overused word until after it was published and being read, and so there's nothing. So now moving forward,
Yeah.
the next one will not be nearly as justy, but it's on my number one, eyes and just. And now I'm doing a lot of something that one of the creatures I have, a noise that they make. That's the new comment. We make this noise a lot. Can we make another noise?
Oh, yes.
So,
And yeah, certain phrases that are just like unique to you that you would
mhm,
use, those can pop up a lot.
yeah.
And I mean, even the really big names get a lot of flack for that.
Hmm.
People are very quick to point out Sarah J. Maas, who is just so insanely successful.
Hmm.
But her character appears to have like irritable bowel syndrome for how often she gets watery bowels. With
Yes.
every gesture, she tends to reuse like the same
Hmm.
words often enough. And I mean, I read her books, I loved them,
Yeah,
but
same.
you do notice how often she uses very particular phrases.
Yes. Yeah. And what's cool about the stories though is that you notice it, but you keep going anyway because
Mhm.
the story itself is
The
so
story
intriguing.
sucks you in.
I know.
So hopefully our readers are forgiving in the same way.
Man, she's the queen of Easter eggs. I aspire to
Mhm.
be as Easter eggy as she is. Like,
Yes.
you go back to the first book and go, "Oh my god, I had no idea."
Mhm. Sounds like she might be a plotter. She knows where
Yeah,
she's going.
probably.
Yeah. All right. So if you could give a new author one piece of advice, what would you tell them?
You're gonna hate the first one, and it's okay.
Mhm.
And it's never gonna be good enough for you. You're gonna want to pull it off any bookshelf you find it on and correct something. Stop. It's okay.
Mhm.
You're gonna learn the next one you write is gonna be better, and the next one you write is gonna be better, and it's gonna be really cool when you go back and read the beginning of your second book and realize that you've become a better writer. And I go back to J.K. Rowling. The
Mhm.
first Harry Potter was, I'm not gonna say it was, I didn't read a lot of them. I
Yeah.
read the first two, and definite difference between the first and the second and the third. It's a really good study in an
Mhm.
author growing.
Oh yeah, and it's similar, I think, with a lot of different series that I have read where, yeah, the first book is like, okay, it's enough to get you to read the second, and then you grow with the author.
Mhm.
Like the characters really bloom. They know what they're doing now. It's
Yeah. So, yeah, the
and
advice would be to keep doing it, and nobody writes a brilliant first. Like, it's, you can always get better. You always will get better.
yeah. I mean, there might be a few, like a handful of
Yeah.
debut author phenomenons.
Right.
Like those are celebrated because they are so few.
Exactly.
A lot of people, they've been writing for 20 years or more before their books are really discovered and blow up. Yesterday or so, I went to Costco and I found this beautiful edition of Bridgerton, which I haven't read, but I watched the show and I enjoyed it. So I thought, oh, well, pick up this beautiful book. So I did, and I noticed on the copyright page that it was like written in the year 2000, which is now 24 years ago, which doesn't feel right. That wasn't that
I
long
know.
ago, right?
Yeah.
But I thought her Bridgerton books were only just adapted to TV. Like she must have gone 20 years from writing that first book before someone like discovered it and blew it up and enough to the point where it got picked up for a show. And I think that that's a good reminder to us that you have to keep going. You have to finish the series. You have to, and somewhere down the line, you might become that author that you're aspiring to be.
Yeah, it's a process. It's a process, and it will never end. It is always a process.
Mm-hmm. That is very good advice. All right. So let's see. What is your favorite part of writing?
This is going to sound like I'm a sick and twisted human being, but revising, I absolutely love revising. I am so excited to get notes back from my editor and to start pouring through it and to fix the thing like that. I love that. Like if I could just skip to that part, that'd be great.
Oh yeah, that's the part that everyone else hates. But I'm totally with you. I love editing and redoing things because like it's all there now. Like the hard part is getting it all down, getting a start to finish story.
Yes.
After that, it's just polishing it.
Yes.
Making it beautiful.
Yes, I love it. So, and I love to get the perspective from my editor, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't think of that. And then to massage it, to grow. And now I'm going back and doing it to myself now. So that's that learning thing where I'm going back and rereading it with her eyes or trying to, and revising it for myself before I even send it to her. But yeah, no, I love doing that.
I love that part when you're so close to the finish line and you're reading it and you're like, this is actually good. Like, I'm enjoying this.
Yeah. Revising, yes. Proofreading, no. I'm terrible. I'm terrible at that.
Oh, goodness. After you've read your own book, like for the 5th or 6th time, you're just like ready to set it on fire and walk away. Like,
take it, Grammarly, be done with it. I don't know.
All right. What was your least favorite part of writing then?
Writing the story.
Writing the story. The writing.
It's the writing part.
It's
sitting
the most
down
part, but it's so hard.
Yeah, it's like having the story in my head, having the ideas, all of that is there. The actual sitting down and writing the words, that part, it's the hardest part to me. It's not a part that it's not that I don't want to do it, but of all of the parts to it, it is honestly the most challenging for me.
Would you say you have any major influences on your writing?
I go back to watching. I'm very cinematic and visually, I'm visually influenced. And that's that going back and watching like Snow White and the Huntsman. I don't know what it is about that. It's not like an Oscar-winning movie or anything, but it's the setting, it's the music. The music is a huge one for me. I was a musician for 20 plus years. I studied classical. I did all of that. And I wanted to do film score writing before I got out of high school, which obviously didn't happen. But I listened to film scores, and film scores are very influential. Like today, I was sitting here bawling, writing a scene, and I wouldn't have been if I didn't have the music that was on, bringing it together. And I wouldn't have written it the way I wrote it if that particular piece had not been on. So I think that I'm a lot more influenced by the music I'm listening to and the visuals that I'm trying to pour into my brain. I think that they have a lot to do with where I take stories.
That's really good. Some authors will actually include playlists in the beginning there, just to sort of set the tone for the chapter, and that's kind of a fun idea. But yeah, music touches part of your soul that unfortunately I wish we could insert it into the book, but
And I even tried when I first released the first version of The Gate, I tried to make playlists, chapter 1 playlist, chapter 2 playlist. And then I'm like, not everybody reads at the same speed. And what if they get to this scene and this song is still on? That won't work. So, yeah, I think
yeah,
I wish you could.
there's only so much you can do with that. But movies definitely have that advantage where they can hit all of your senses like that.
Yeah.
Oh, well. But reading, you have to just create it in your brain with words, paint with words.
Yeah, and I can't listen to music when I read, so that's weird. I have to listen to it when I write. I'm really hard pressed to write when it's quiet. So music is very helpful, but when I'm reading, I can't listen to anything.
Do you ever deal with writer's block?
All the time. All the time. And that's a byproduct of me just waiting for the characters to do something and finding the time to sit down and write and be uninterrupted. And I will write a whole page and delete it because we start to become I call it fantasy Scooby-Doo. It starts to be and then. And I've learned it's okay to hit delete. That's a big lesson to learn. Like, you don't have to save every single word you've written, even though I do save some, but delete is okay.
See my guilty side eyes. I have a document where I transfer old writing just so that it's less painful for me than hitting delete.
Agreed. And I do have that too. I have a notes section at the end and I'll drop it in. And then I have a scene, like a whole bunch of scenes from this book that I'm writing that I'm going to actually use in the third book. And I was so excited when I got to open a new file and name it what the third book is going to be called. And I was like, it's real. So yeah, I do save stuff too. But just your little where it's just la 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 la. I don't have to.
Oh yeah. And sometimes, you write a whole page and you realize that this is the wrong direction. The characters aren't happy with this. This is not where I want to go. But you had to write it first to figure that out.
Exactly. It's not moving the story forward, but I had to go this way to realize that. Yeah.
I don't think enough writers know that it's okay to do that, to write it wrong a few times just so you know where it isn't, what it isn't.
It's like walking through a room in the dark and you have to hit the wall until you find the passageway to go down.
Yes. But meanwhile, your characters are like, nope, not doing it. Nope.
Yep. For real.
For real. Yeah. Sometimes they look at me and you're like, are you going through something right now? Like,
why am I paying this price for you?
Yes.
Mine does that a lot.
What would you say has been your most significant writing victory so far?
Understanding that after releasing the first version of my debut novel, it was okay to go back and do it over. That I learned that all hope was not lost, that just because it went out one way doesn't mean I can't reel it back in and do what I want to do and start it over. And realizing that I had the autonomy to do that. I had the kind of presence of mind to be able to do that. And I had the control to be able to do that. I think that was really big for me. I was able to take something that I thought was a disaster, and it really wasn't a disaster, but in my mind, it was the worst disaster ever. But to be able to say, it's okay. It's okay. One day in 20 years, I'll look back and go, remember when I published that the first time and it was terrible?
Well, it's so hard because these books are our babies, and we want to give them every advantage out in that world because it's so rough and there's so much competition. And we give it bits of ourselves, a piece of our soul that we've let go. And it's just heartbreaking to think that it might not have been perfect the first time around.
Yeah. And learning that it still isn't perfect.
No.
And that's okay.
No book is.
No. And that's a huge victory to be able to acknowledge that and keep going anyway.
I actually celebrate a little bit when I find a typo in a traditionally published book.
Oh yeah.
Because I want to get a highlighter and circle it and be like, See?
It's not just me.
It's not just me. It's not just indies. It's not, yeah.
No. But yeah, I think that's a big victory for any writer.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do you have any writing advice that you were given that just really doesn't help? Like you hate this advice?
Well, the advice is just get the words on paper.
Okay.
That does nothing for me at all. I'm like, no, because I can't. Because once I get something down that's like crooked, I'm like,
They have to be good words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and this works for a lot of people. Just get them on paper. I'm like, good for you. You get those on paper. I'm not that person.
Yes.
100%.
Yes. My best friend is that kind of person. She'll knock out like 3,000 words in an evening because she is just throwing them on there. And gosh darn it, if they aren't really good words, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's her method, and I have to not compare me to her and like let go of needing to be that because I'm not that.
Exactly.
You know, I will spend hours and hours and I have 300 words, but they are good words that I feel good about. Yeah. So it's okay to be a little slower to be yourself.
Yes. 100%.
All right. Well, if you would like, you can tell us a little bit more about your books. And if you want to, you can share your socials. Where can people find out more about you online?
The second improved version is it's backward. No, it's not. Oh, yay. It's called The Gate.
Mm-hmm.
It's book 1 of the Immortal Coil saga. It is on Amazon. It is on Barnes & Noble. It's on Audible and Spotify. So I have the ebook, the audiobook, and the actual book. Like the actual book, the paperback.
Mm-hmm.
Book 2, which all I have is a bookmark. That's all I have. I don't have it yet. Mage Crown is due out at the end of December, and it will be on all the same platforms. Audiobook probably won't be out until February because I was a terrible human being and missed my deadline with my narrator. So it'll be out when it's out. I am on all my socials are the same. It's B Schonberg Auth.
Okay.
Every one of them is B Schonberg Auth, just for my own personal sake because I would forget otherwise. And then my website is the name of the little publishing company that I made for myself, and it's called The Bookish Berg. And the funny thing about that is I'm actually engaged and I'm remarrying in June. And my fiance's last name ends in Berg, just like mine does. So I said, if I name it the Bookish Berg, I don't have to change it. It's like it can stay the same. But my YA is under the name Tabitha Leigh, Leigh, and this is my little novella Hide. And the sequel to this will be called Seek, because why not?
That's perfect.
It's set in South Texas. It's set in my hometown. Yeah. So I have my website. That's where I keep everything up to date. And I have links there for everything. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. You're a real joy to talk to.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your upcoming wedding as well.
Thank you.
It's exciting.
Yes, very much. Very,
right.
very much. But I really appreciate getting a chance to talk about all of the things and letting people know how cuckoo I am.
You know what? It's one of my favorite things to talk to other authors. That's one reason why we do the show is just, it's so much fun to talk about writing and writing methods and, you know, what did you release and why, and what genres do you enjoy and what have you learned? It's so, it feels so nice.
Because writing is very lonely.
It is lonely. And everyone else in our life is so tired of hearing about our books.
Or the books that they haven't, you know, they didn't read the first ones. They don't know what's going on. And you'd say, oh, and this. And they're like, cool.
Yeah.
Got nothing for you.
Yes. So connecting with other authors is just so much fun.
It is. Absolutely.
And thank you to all of our listeners at home, and join us next week when we welcome our next guest. And remember, there's always more than one way up a mountain. To be on our show, find us on social media at The Tell Not Show or email us at thetellnotshow hijinkshow@gmail.com. Thanks.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach and can be found at hijinksrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to 4, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks and see you next time.